Welcome back to Wisdom Unveiled. This is our second deep dive into the world of Hakim Abu Qasim Ferdowsi and his epic, the Shahnameh.
And hello again. Just a quick reminder before we jump in. This discussion is based on translations of conversations with Iranian philosophers, primarily Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani. Translations can sometimes miss nuances, so we apologize for any discrepancies and definitely welcome your feedback.
So last time we talked about the Shahnameh as this grand Hamasa, this epic full of national spirit. But the question that struck me, and what we're digging into today, is how does this epic, famous for battles and heroes, actually start? It starts with philosophy, really deep philosophy.
It really does. That's exactly what the philosophers we're drawing from highlight. They say, yes, it's a Hamasa, but it's, and I quote, full of philosophy. It's not just action, it's epic thought.
Yeah, and they made that interesting distinction, didn't they, between someone like Sohrawardi writing philosophical epics and Ferdowsi writing epic philosophy. Like, the philosophy is baked into the epic structure itself.
Exactly. It's an epic that aims to stir the uqul, the intellect, not just the emotions.
Okay, so let's dive into those opening lines. The very first one. In the name of the Lord of life, Yan, and wisdom, Kairad. That thought cannot pass beyond this. What's going on there?
Right. So the philosophers see Yan, life or spirit, as intrinsically linked to and guided by Harad, wisdom, which is basically Aql, intellect. Life finds its proper direction through wisdom.
Makes sense. Life and wisdom together.
But then that second part, that thought cannot pass beyond this, is crucial. It immediately sets a limit. God, the ultimate reality invoked here, is beyond the reach of our endisha, our conceptual thought.
So right from the start, he's saying there are things our minds just can't fully grasp.
Precisely. And he follows it up almost immediately with, the viewer cannot see the creator. Don't torment the two viewers.
The two viewers are eyes, right?
Yeah.
It immediately makes you think of Prophet Moses on the mountain.
It's a direct echo, yes. The philosophers point straight to that Quranic story. Moses asks Rabbi Irini, show me yourself, and God replies, Lantarani, you will not see me. Ferdowsi is packing that entire theological concept into this line.
You can't see God with your physical eyes. Don't even try. Don't torment them.
Exactly. Sense perception has its limits. It's tied to the material world. And this ties into another really key verse from the Quran.
La tudriku al-absar.
Wa huwa yudriku al-absar. Vision does not perceive him, but he perceives vision.
Okay, that's profound. He perceives vision, not just what we see, but the seeing itself.
That's the crucial insight the philosophers emphasize. God doesn't just see objects or people. He perceives the very reality of vision, the reality of perception, of idrak, understanding. Our ability to perceive, our idrak, is a kind of reflection or manifestation of his absolute perception.
Wow. So our seeing depends on his seed of seeing itself.
In a way, yes. Because he is that absolute perception. We, as limited beings, have our perception. It flips the script on thinking our senses are the ultimate source of knowledge.
It really does.
Yeah.
It feels like a direct pushback against, pure empiricism. Centuries before that became a dominant idea in the West.
Absolutely. Ferdowsi is saying right at the beginning, senses are important, but they need guidings from the intellect. You need to be aqlani, rational. True understanding goes deeper than just what the eyes can take in.
Okay, so we can't fully grasp God through thought, and we can't see God through our senses. Where does he go next with this theme of God's transcendence?
He reinforces it. He says God is higher than name and place, and that our thought, our andisha, cannot reach the divine dot, the absolute essence.
Right, the dot. So more more emphasis on God being utterly beyond our categories.
Exactly. The philosophers explain it like this. Our thinking works with names and attributes, the asma wasifat. We can think about God as merciful, as powerful, as wise. These are concepts we can sort of handle. But the dot, the unconditioned essence itself, that's permanently off limits to our conceptual thought.
That sounds very similar to ideas in, say, the Naj al-Balagha, that first sermon about not comprehending God's essence.
Yes, and the philosophers are quite confident Ferdowsi was deeply familiar with these kinds of sources, with the currents of wisdom in his time. This idea of the inaccessible essence is fundamental.
And does this touch on that old debate about whether God's attributes are, like, added to his essence, Zayd Bardaud, or identical to it, Adad?
It does connect, yeah. We don't need to get lost in the technicalities, but the general philosophical view Ferdowsi seems to reflect is the attributes are the essence. And the implication is, if they're identical, then just as you can't grasp the essence, you can't grasp the ultimate reality, the kone of an attribute like mercy or power either.
Because the reality of the attribute is the reality of the essence.
Precisely. Our understanding of mercy is based on our limited human experience of it. It's a pointer, a reflection, not the divine reality itself. So essence or attribute, the ultimate reality is beyond us.
Yeah, that really drives home the point about transcendence. Now, what about these lines? Lord of name and Lord of place higher than name and sign and conjecture. The creator of the elevated jewel, Gohari Bashore.
Okay, so Lord of Name, Sahib name, connects clearly to the Islamic idea of God's beautiful names, the Asma al-Husna. These names reveal aspects of reality. Think of the verse, he taught Adam the names.
Right. Names as keys to understanding reality. And Lord of place, Sahib J.
That signifies God as the Lord of all existence, the ultimate ground of being. He's the reality from which all places, all beings arise.
And then higher than name and sign and conjecture again, transcendence. But this elevated jewel, the Gohir Bashoda, that sounds specific.
It is. According to the philosophers, this is a direct and very important reference to the Aqli Awal,
The first intellect.
the first intellect. This immediately brings to mind that foundational hadith in Islamic philosophy.
The first thing God created was the intellect.
Exactly that one. So the philosophers argue, by starting his epic poem, his Hamasa, not just with God, but with the creation of the intellect as this elevated jewel, Ferdowsi is deliberately placing his entire work within this profound philosophical and mystical framework. It's a statement about the absolute primacy of intellect in the cosmic order.
That is powerful. To put the intellect right there at the very beginning of creation in the opening lines of the national epic. How does he then connect this to Sokhan, to speech or language?
Ah, yes, the lines about Sokhan. Sokhan, whatever passes beyond these jewels, neither finds the way of John, life, nor Herod, wisdom. And then Karad, if it chooses Sokhan, it praises only what it sees.
So what's the relationship between intellect, Karad, and speech, Sokhan, here?
The philosophers see Sokhan language as the direct manifestation of andesha, of thought. You literally cannot speak what you haven't first conceived or thought. Your speech can't go beyond your thought.
So language expresses thought, but it's also limited by the scope of that thought.
Exactly. They are, two sides of the same coin. No real thought without language, no meaningful language without thought. And they go further, saying this Sokhan is the fundamental tool for all human creativity.
All creativity, like building things, writing poems.
Everything, they argue, everything is created with Sokhan, because any human creation starts with a concept, a thought, expressed and developed through language or some form of symbolic Sokhan, like plans or mathematical notation.
Okay, I can see that. But then they ask a deeper question, right? Can we create Sokhan itself? Can humans invent the very system of language?
And their answer, rooted in this tradition, is no. We humans, we assign words, alfaz, to meanings. We agree that tree refers to that thing, that's was placement. But the underlying structure of language, grammar, syntax, the ability to handle universal concepts, the whole system that allows us to combine meanings infinitely, that capacity, they argue, is innate, part of our idnye, afitta, and it's divinely created.
So the ability for language is a gift, not something we built from scratch.
That's the view. They connect it directly to Quranic verses like Odas. He taught him expression language, and Odash, and he taught Adam all the names. Language isn't just physical sounds made by muscles. It's fundamentally metaphysical.
Metaphysical, how so?
Because it deals with universals, Kudiat, the concept of treeness, not just this particular oak tree. Universals don't exist physically in the same way individual things do, and it's our unique ability to combine meanings, to build complex thoughts and sentences, something animals don't do in the same way. That underlying structure, that capacity, is seen as metaphysical and God-given.
That gives language a whole different weight, doesn't it? Okay, moving on. Ferdowsi talks about intellect as a measure. Kerad, wisdom, and life, it measures, sanjad, and in the firm sakte, and measured sanja, thought, and jisha. How does it fit? What's this measuring?
Sanjide is a key word here. Measured, weighed, sifted, ordered. The philosophers stress that intellect, akal, is the ultimate mizan, the ultimate scale or measure. Think about it. Any system of measurement we use, kilograms, meters, musical scales, poetic meter, where does its validity come from?
From the intellect that devised it and understands it.
Exactly. Intellect is the foundation for all order and measurement. And this idea of sanjide, of being measured and ordered, connects directly to the concept of nizam, cosmic order. Creation, khalq, isn't just popping things into existence, it's about establishing order.
So God as the creator is also God the organizer.
Yes, he's the Khalq and the Nazm. It resonates with ideas like Plato's demiurge, but within an Islamic context, of course. And this order isn't random, it's rational. That's why justice, Atal, is also seen as fundamentally rooted in Aql. You can't have justice without the discerning, ordering power of intellect.
And the ultimate measure, the mizan, for all this order and justice,
Is the intellect itself, specifically the universal intellect, aqwali kul, that goher, that elevated jewel Ferdowsi mentioned right near the beginning. The philosophers see this as part of a long tradition, maybe even pre-Islamic Khusravani wisdom, that Islam illuminated and perfected.
it's really incredible how much he packs in. Cosmology, knowledge, God, creation, order. All in a few lines. So what's the core message about wisdom itself? He says, Dana, wise, is the one who is Tavana, powerful. From knowledge, the old heart becomes young.
This is a huge statement. Dana Tavanist wisdom is power. Ferdowsi is making a direct link. Without Dana knowledge or wisdom, human power Tavanai is just brute force or animal instinct.
Right.
Real capability, the power to create, to lead effectively, to understand and shape the world that stems from knowledge.
So it's not just knowing facts, it's about effective capability.
Precisely. And the philosophers note this contrast, perhaps, with some theological interpretations that might overemphasize God's raw power, kudra, without fully integrating it with his absolute wisdom, hikmat. Ferdowsi clearly aligns with the view that God's power and wisdom are inseparable.
And the second line, from knowledge, the old heart becomes young.
This speaks to who a true peer and elder, a guide, really is. It's not about chronological age or appearance. A true guide is defined by their denai, their wisdom. An ignorant guide, no matter how old, is blind and misleads others. Knowledge makes the heart young, meaning vibrant, alive, perceptive, truly capable.
So guidance comes from inner substance, from wisdom, not just position or years. It reminds me of Rumi Malavi talking about the intellect being the real peer.
Absolutely. You see these themes echoing down through Persian wisdom literature, and Ferdowsi's influence is undeniable.
Okay, so we've journeyed through the limits of our knowing, the nature of language, the centrality of intellect, wisdom as power. After acknowledging how little we can truly grasp of the divine essence, what's the final step Ferdowsi points to in these opening verses?
He points towards bandegi, servitude, worship, often translated as obudiyat. He asks, with this tool language reason, who can praise the creator? Recognizing our tools are inadequate.
Right.
Then he says we must confess, Kasto, God's being, acknowledge his reality, and ultimately recognizing our inability to truly praise him as he deserves, we must tie the waist of servitude, bandegi.
So the culmination is recognizing limits and entering a state of bandegi or obudiyat.
Yes, but the philosophers give ogudiyat a very specific, profound meaning here. It's not just about performing rituals or being subservient in a simple way. It is the deep recognition and conscious expression of one's absolute dependence and inability to reach the kone, the essence of the divine, by one's own power.
So the act of worship, obudiyat, is fundamentally about realizing our own limits.
That's the core of it, yes. That very realization, that confession of helplessness before the absolute, is paradoxically seen as both the starting point and the highest peak, the qual of genuine knowledge, Maarefat.
Wow, that's a twist. The summit of knowing is knowing you can't fully know the essence.
It's a profound paradox, and it connects to that famous mystical saying, Alobudiyat shaharatun kunuha rubiyat.
Servitude is a jewel whose essence is lordship.
Exactly. By fully realizing and embodying one's own limited reality, servitude, one actually begins to perceive, to get a glimpse of, the nature of absolute reality, lordship.
And this must connect back to that verse about why humans and jinn were created.
وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ, and I did not create the jinn and humans except that they may worship me. Many philosophers and mystics interpret liyabudun, that they may worship, as meaning liyarifun, that they may know me.
I see.
So ubudiyat isn't just a duty imposed from outside. It's the natural outcome, the necessary expression of attaining deep knowledge or fawn of one's true place in the cosmos relative to the divine reality.
Just exploring these opening lines feels like unpacking a whole philosophical system. It's clear Ferdowsi wasn't just telling stories.
Not at all. He's laying down markers for theology, epistemology, cosmology, ethics, mysticism. It's all there. He truly earns the title Hakim, sage philosopher.
And he did all this while essentially shaping the Persian language into a vessel capable of holding such complex thought. his impact on everything that came after is just immense.
It really is. The power of a wise mind using language masterfully. And these ideas, thousands of years old, woven into this poetry, they still speak powerfully to us today about knowledge, power, and our connection to something ultimate.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this dive into Ferdowsi's profound opening, here's something for you to think about. We talked about how acknowledging our limits, embracing that ubudiyat, can paradoxically be the gateway to deeper knowledge. How might consciously acknowledging your own limitations in some area of your life, maybe something you're struggling to understand or achieve, actually open up a new path to a different, perhaps even more powerful kind of insight or capability? Something to ponder